Imagine a mother, her body skeletal and weak, using the very last of her warmth to shield her newborn children from a relentless, falling snow. Her pleas for help have been ignored by everyone who passes, and in her eyes, a final, flickering hope is about to die. This is the true story of Grace. As you listen, every like is a gesture of warmth she never received, and every share is the voice she never had. By subscribing, you help us continue to give a voice to the voiceless. Now, let us take you to a cold, forgotten alley in Silver Creek, Montana, where our story begins. The wind that swept through Silver Creek, Montana, carried the ghosts of better days. It whispered of the time when the smelter on the edge of town glowed through the night and the diner, now a hollowed-out carcass of peeling paint and shattered windows, was filled with the sounds of laughter and the smell of hot coffee. Now, the wind only carried the scent of decay and the biting promise of a long winter. Late autumn had bled the last warmth from the land, and the sky, a canvas of bruised gray, had just begun to shed its first brittle snowflakes. They fell without a sound, melting against the cold, damp pavement of the alley behind the diner, a place of forgotten things. And in that place of forgotten things, a mother was refusing to be forgotten. Beneath the skeletal remains of an iron staircase that clung to the brick wall, Grace lay curled into a question mark of a body. She was a German shepherd, perhaps 4 years old, though starvation had aged her into a tired caricature of her noble breed. Her once lustrous coat of black and rich tan was now a matted, filthy pelt, clinging to a frame so thin her ribs showed like the teeth of a saw. Her intelligent brown eyes, usually bright with life, were sunken and hollow, clouded by a despair so profound it seemed to have extinguished all light. The cold from the concrete seeped into her bones, a deep and relentless ache that was second only to the gnawing emptiness in her belly. But her own suffering was a distant hum, a background noise to the singular, terrifying focus of her existence. Tucked into the curve of her belly were 3 tiny, shivering forms. Her puppies, no more than a few days old, were fragile miracles of life in a world determined to snuff them out. Their fur, a sparse and downy fuzz of black and brown, offered almost no protection against the encroaching cold. They were barely more than heartbeats wrapped in skin, their blind and desperate mouths searching for a nourishment she could no longer provide. Her milk was a thin, watery memory, a cruel joke her body played on the 3 tiny lives that depended on it. All she had left to give was the dwindling warmth of her own body, and she gave it with a fierce, silent devotion, pressing them closer, trying to shield them from a wind that felt like a physical blow. A sudden sound cut through the alley's mournful whistle. Footsteps. Grace's head lifted, her ears, one of which was torn at the tip, twitching with a desperate flicker of hope. A man in a thick work coat and heavy boots strode past the mouth of the alley, his face set against the wind. Grace gathered what little strength she had and let out a faint, reedy whine. It was not a bark or a growl, but the sound of a question, a plea. The man glanced over, his eyes lingering for a bare second on the dirty dog huddled in the shadows. He saw a stray, a piece of the town's decay, an inconvenience. He pulled his collar higher and quickened his pace, his footsteps fading into the distance. Hope, fragile as it was, shattered like ice. Grace laid her head back down, a tremor running through her exhausted body. A little while later, another sound. A couple, their arms linked, their voices bright with talk of dinner plans. They paused as they passed the alley. "Oh, look, honey, how sad," the woman murmured, her voice laced with a soft, detached pity. Grace looked up again, her eyes begging, conveying a story of motherhood and desperation that needed no words. "Don't look," her companion said, gently tugging her arm. "It probably has rabies or something. Let's go." And they were gone, leaving behind only the echo of their casual dismissal. That was the moment something inside Grace broke. The world was a wall of indifference, a place of deaf ears and hard hearts. There would be no help. There was only her, the cold, and the 3 precious lives she had brought into this unforgiving world. The last ember of her fight for herself went out, leaving only the fierce primal instinct of a mother. She nudged her puppies with her nose, licking their tiny heads with a dry tongue, her body a shield against the inevitable. The snowflakes were no longer melting. They were beginning to stick, dusting the rusted iron of the staircase and her own matted fur in a delicate, deadly layer of white. The gray afternoon bled into a deep, starless twilight, and the cold tightened its grip. Grace closed her eyes, listening to the 3 faint, fluttering heartbeats against her own, and prayed to a God she had long forgotten, for a warmth that would never come. Liam felt the town's decay in his own bones. At 26, he wore a weariness that didn't belong on a young man's shoulders, a quiet shadow in his hazel eyes that spoke of dreams that had crumbled to dust. He had fled Silver Creek for the promise of the city, only to have it chew him up and spit him back out, stripped of his savings and his confidence. Now he was home, walking the same cracked sidewalks, under the same perpetually overcast sky, the town's boarded-up storefronts a perfect mirror for his own hollowed-out future. He walked with no destination, his hands jammed into the pockets of a worn denim jacket, the cold air a welcome sting that distracted him from the suffocating feeling of failure. He was lost, adrift in the place he was supposed to know best. It was a sound, barely there, that snagged his attention. A thin, high-pitched note, almost carried away by the wind whistling past the corner of the derelict diner. He paused, listening. It was probably just the wind catching a loose piece of metal, another part of the town sighing its slow death, but something in the sound was different. It wasn't metallic or sharp, it was organic, alive, and laced with a pain that resonated with the ache in his own chest. Drawn by a curiosity he couldn't explain, he turned from the street and stepped into the deepening gloom of the alley. His eyes took a moment to adjust to the shadows. He saw the pile first, a heap of what looked like dirty rags or discarded trash huddled beneath the rusty fire escape. Then the pile shivered, and a head lifted slowly, painfully. It was a dog. A German shepherd, so gaunt she looked more like a specter than a living creature. And then their eyes met. In that instant, the world fell away. Liam had seen stray dogs before, had felt the usual pang of pity. But this was different. He didn't just see an animal. He saw a soul pushed to the absolute edge. In the depths of her brown eyes, beyond the pain and the fear, he saw a despair so profound it felt familiar, a shared language of defeat. It was the same hollow feeling he saw in his own reflection each morning, the look of someone cornered by the world with nothing left to lose. He saw the faint movement at her belly then, the tiny, twitching bodies she was trying to protect. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't just dying. She was a mother trying to stop her children from dying with her. His own self-pity evaporated, replaced by a wave of raw, aching empathy. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, and Grace flinched, a low growl rumbling in her chest, a sound that held no threat, only terror. "Easy there," Liam whispered, his voice softer than he'd intended. He stopped, raising his hands slowly in a universal gesture of peace. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." He stood perfectly still, letting her see that he was not a threat. He remembered the half-eaten sandwich in his jacket pocket, left over from a lunch he'd had no appetite for. Slowly, deliberately, so as not to spook her, he pulled it out. The crinkle of the wrapper was loud in the quiet alley. He unwrapped the turkey and cheese on wheat bread, his movements measured and calm. He knelt, the cold of the damp pavement seeping through his jeans, and placed the sandwich on the ground, a safe distance from her and her precious cargo. Then he backed away, giving her space. Grace watched his every move, her body tense as a drawn bowstring. Fear warred with a hunger so intense it was a physical agony. For a long moment she remained frozen, but the scent of the food was a siren's call to her starving body. With a darting, convulsive movement, she lunged forward, snatched the sandwich, and retreated to her spot beneath the stairs, devouring it in 3 desperate, gulping bites. She didn't even seem to chew. Liam's heart broke. He watched her lick the ground where the sandwich had been, her gaze never leaving him, still wary, still terrified. He knew he couldn't leave them here. Not in this cold. Not with the snow falling harder now, blanketing the alley in a soft white shroud. He had to get help. He stayed for another minute, wanting to fix the problem with his own 2 hands, but knowing he couldn't. "I'll be back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He spoke the words as a solemn vow. "I promise you, I will be back." He turned and walked out of the alley, his steps no longer aimless, but filled with a new, urgent purpose. The biting wind no longer bothered him. The weight of his own failures felt lighter, pushed aside by the immense weight of the promise he had just made. He was still lost, but now, for the first time in a long time, he had a direction. He had to save them. Liam's feet pounded against the pavement, each stride fueled by the adrenaline of his new mission. The snow was coming down harder now, swirling in the cones of light from the few lonely street lamps that still worked. His own problems were a distant echo. His mind was consumed by the image of the mother dog, her hollow eyes, and the impossible fragility of her newborns. He knew who he had to call. There was only one person in a town this size who would answer a call like this after dark. He fumbled in his pocket for his cheap cell phone, his fingers numb with cold, and dialed the number for the Silver Creek Veterinary Clinic, a number he knew by heart from a childhood filled with pets. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice, sharp and tired, cut through the static. "Reed here." "Dr. Reed? It's Liam." "Liam Peterson." There was a pause. "Peterson. Of course. Heard you were back in town. It's late, Liam. If this is about Mrs. Gable's cat again, I already told her he just needs to lose weight." "No, it's not that," he said, his words rushing out. "It's a dog, a stray. She's in the alley behind the old diner. She just had puppies, Dr. Reed. They're newborns. I don't think they're going to make it through the night. The mother is starving." A heavy sigh came through the phone. The sound of a woman who had heard 1,000 sad stories and was too tired for one more. "Son, this town is full of strays. I can't save them all, much as I might want to." "But this one is different," Liam insisted, his voice cracking with an earnestness that surprised even himself. "You should see her. She's trying so hard. Please, they'll freeze to death. I'm begging you." The line went quiet for a long moment, long enough for Liam to think she'd hung up. Then, another, softer sigh. "All right, son. You've got a good heart just like your mother. Meet me at the clinic in 10 minutes. I'll get the truck." Dr. Evelyn Reed was a woman carved from the tough-minded pragmatism of the Montana landscape. Now in her late 60s, with her silver hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun, she had a face lined with compassion and a gaze that missed nothing. She met Liam by the door of her small, neat clinic, carrying a large plastic carrier and a worn leather medical bag. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Get in," she said, gesturing to a beat-up Ford pickup that looked as old and resilient as she was. They drove back to the alley in near silence. The world was now cloaked in a blanket of white. When the truck's headlights swept across the alley entrance, they illuminated a scene of profound stillness. Grace was still there, a snow-dusted mound of fur, barely distinguishable from the surrounding refuse. "Okay," Dr. Reed said, her voice low and professional as she killed the engine. "She's terrified. That morsel of trust she has is with you, Liam. You're going to have to be the one to get close." As they approached on foot, Grace's head shot up. The presence of a second person sent a fresh wave of terror through her. A low, continuous growl vibrated in her chest as she shuffled her body, creating an impenetrable wall of fur and bone between her puppies and the 2 figures. Liam did as he was told. He moved slowly, his boots crunching softly in the fresh snow. He stopped a dozen feet away and lowered himself to a crouch, making himself smaller. "Hey, Grace," he said, his voice a steady, calming murmur. "It's me. I'm back, just like I promised. We're here to help you. We're going to get you and your babies somewhere warm." He didn't reach out. He just talked. A constant, gentle stream of reassurance. From a safe distance, Dr. Reed directed the operation. "Keep her focused on you, Liam. Don't let her look at me." While Liam held Grace's gaze, the old vet moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency. She knelt, her gloved hands reaching gently under Grace's body. Grace whined, a high panicked sound, her head whipping between Liam and the vet, but Liam's voice held her in place. "It's okay, girl. You're being so brave. It's okay." One by one, Dr. Reed lifted the tiny, frigid puppies. She checked each one with a quick, expert touch before placing it inside the warm, blanket-lined carrier. The puppies, so still before, began to whimper at the movement. Once all three were safely inside, the vet latched the carrier door. The hardest part was over. Now they just had to get the mother. Dr. Reed picked up the carrier and began walking slowly toward the truck. Grace's frantic gaze followed the carrier, her maternal instinct overpowering her fear. She rose on trembling legs and took a hesitant step, then another, following the precious cargo. At the truck, Liam opened the passenger door, and Dr. Reed placed the carrier on the seat. Grace stopped at the threshold, her paws on the snowy ground, her head raised, peering into the dark cab. She was terrified of the enclosed space, but the sound of her whimpering pups was an undeniable pull. Liam knelt beside her one last time. "It's okay, Grace," he said, looking directly into her fearful eyes. "This is it. You'll be safe now. All of you. I promise." It was as if she understood. With a final, shuddering breath, she gathered her remaining strength and leaped into the cab, collapsing onto the floor mat and pressing her body as close as she could to the carrier. Liam shut the door, and a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees washed over him. Inside the truck, Doctor Reed started the engine, and the heater roared to life, blowing blessed warm air into the frozen space. The truck pulled away from the curb, leaving the dark, cold alley behind, a tomb they had just escaped. Grace laid her head down, and for the first time in a very long time, a tremor ran through her that was not from the cold, but from the simple, profound release of hope finally answered. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the gentle hum of medical equipment were the first things Grace registered in her new world. It was a world of warmth and soft blankets, a stark, unbelievable contrast to the frozen alley that had nearly become her grave. Dr. Reed's clinic was small but efficient, and Grace found herself in a large, clean kennel, a bowl of fresh water always full. In those first days, she was a passive patient. She allowed the vet to check her teeth, to administer medication, and to gently clean her matted fur. She lay still as an IV line fed life-giving fluids directly into her veins, her body too exhausted to protest. Her only concern was the faint sound of her puppies, who were nestled together in a nearby incubator, safe under the steady, life-sustaining glow of a heat lamp. Liam was there when she woke from her first deep sleep, his face a familiar beacon in this strange new place. He didn't enter her kennel at first, just sat on a stool outside, speaking to her in that same low, calming voice she now associated with safety and the miraculous taste of food. He was her constant. While Dr. Reed managed the medical side of their recovery, feeding Grace a special high-calorie gruel and supplementing the puppy's nursing with formula from a tiny bottle, Liam tended to their spirits. His life found a new rhythm, one that revolved around the clinic. Every morning he would arrive, and the first thing he would do was clean Grace's kennel, replacing the bedding and talking to her the entire time. At first, she would only watch him, her eyes wary, her tail still. But after a few days, a change began. A soft thump of her tail against the floor would greet his arrival. Then one afternoon, as he knelt to slide her food bowl inside, she took a hesitant step forward and gently licked his hand. The touch was feather-light, but for Liam, it felt like the sun breaking through the clouds. This process was healing him as much as it was healing them. The gnawing feeling of failure that had followed him back to Silver Creek began to recede, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. He found himself smiling, a genuine smile that reached his eyes as he watched the puppies transform. They grew from fragile, squirming creatures into clumsy, exploring toddlers. The day they opened their eyes, Liam was there. He sat on the floor with them as they took their first wobbly steps, tumbling over his legs and each other in heaps of soft fur. It was during one of these sessions that he gave them their names. He picked up the stockiest male, whose paws were already comically large. "You're Bear," he whispered. The sleekest, most restless one, always wriggling, became River. And the smallest female, with a delicate face and enormous soulful eyes, he named Fawn. He would sit with them for hours, feeling their warm, trusting bodies climb over him, and the weight on his own shoulders would lift. "Doctor." Reed would often watch him from the doorway, a small, knowing smile on her face. The weary young man who had called her in a panic was gone, and in his place was someone lighter, someone who had found a reason to care again. About 2 weeks into their stay, when Grace's coat was beginning to regain its shine and her pups were turning into rambunctious balls of energy, Dr. Reed approached Liam with a gentle but serious expression. "They're doing wonderfully, Liam. Better than I could have hoped," she began, wiping her hands on a towel. "But we need to talk about what comes next. I'm a clinic, not a shelter. I can't keep them here forever." The words hit Liam with the force of a cold wind. "What about the county shelter?" he asked, a knot of dread forming in his stomach. Dr. Reed shook her head, her expression pained. "It's overflowing, underfunded. A mother with 3 pups, they'd likely be separated to improve their chances of adoption. And it's a loud, stressful place. It's no life for them." Liam looked at Grace, who was now watching her 3 children play, a look of serene motherhood on her face. He looked at Bear, River, and Fawn, so full of life and trust. The thought of them being separated or locked in a cold, concrete cage was unbearable. A surge of fierce protectiveness washed over him. He would not let their story end that way. An idea sparked in his mind, a relic of his time in the city where everything happened online. "I'll find them a home," he said, his voice filled with a new resolve. "A real home. All of them together." That evening he pulled out his phone. He took a photo of Grace as she lay with her head resting on her paws, her 3 puppies asleep in a pile beside her, a perfect portrait of maternal devotion. He created a new social media page, and after a moment's thought, he typed in the name, Grace's Hope. He began to write, telling their story from the beginning. The cold alley, the indifference, the rescue in the snow, and their incredible journey of revival. He poured all of his awe and affection for this brave little family into the words. With a deep breath, he hit the post button, sending their story out into the digital world, praying that somewhere a miracle was listening. The post on the Grace's Hope page felt like a message in a bottle tossed into a vast digital ocean. For a few days, the response was a ripple of local sympathy. Likes, shares, and comments filled with well wishes, but no solid offers. Liam and Dr. Reed tried to remain optimistic, but a quiet anxiety began to build as the puppies grew bigger and the kennel seemed smaller. Then, late one evening, an email arrived. It was from a woman named Sarah Miller, and its subject line was simply, Your Grace. The email was everything they had prayed for. Sarah wrote that she and her husband, Tom, lived on a ranch just outside Bozeman, on the other side of the state. They had 2 children, 10-year-old Chloe and 8-year-old Sam, and they had recently lost their beloved 14-year-old border collie to old age. The house had felt empty ever since. She said she had stumbled across Liam's post, shared by a friend, and her entire family had been moved to tears by Grace's story of survival and devotion. The final sentence made Liam's breath catch in his throat. We have more than enough room and love, and we would never dream of separating a family like that. A video call was arranged for the next day. Sarah and Tom Miller were exactly as their email had suggested. Warm, grounded people with kind eyes and easy smiles. They listened intently as Liam and Dr. Reed recounted the details of the rescue. In the background, Chloe and Sam could be seen, their faces pressed close to the screen, their expressions a mixture of awe and shy hope. It was clear this was not a whim. This was a family ready to open their hearts completely. This was the miracle. The farewell was the hardest part. They agreed to meet halfway, in the city of Helena, to spare the dogs a single, overwhelmingly long journey. On the final morning, a bittersweet quiet settled over the clinic. Liam spent an hour on the floor with the little family. Grace, now sleek and healthy, her coat shining with life, rested her head on his lap. River, Bear, and Fawn, now boisterous and confident, tumbled over each other, attacking his shoelaces. They were blissfully unaware that their lives were about to change forever. The drive across Montana was a silent, reflective journey. Liam looked in the rearview mirror at Grace, who sat regally on the back seat, watching over her pups. He saw not the ghost from the alley, but a queen. He thought about the man he had been just a few weeks ago, adrift and hollowed out by his own perceived failures. In his desperate need to save her, he had inadvertently found the path to saving himself. She had given him a purpose when he had none. They met the Millers in a quiet park on the edge of the city. As soon as Sarah and Tom opened their car doors, their children spilled out, their eyes wide with wonder. Grace was cautious for only a moment before her tail gave a soft, tentative wag, sensing the gentle energy from the newcomers. Liam opened the back of his own car, and the puppies, thrilled by the new smells, bounded out onto the grass. "This is Bear," Liam said, his voice thick as he pointed to the stocky pup. "That's River, and the little girl is Fawn, and this is their mom, Grace." He knelt down one last time, wrapping his arms around Grace's neck and burying his face in her warm fur. "Be happy, girl," he whispered, his voice choked with unshed tears. "You deserve all the happiness in the world." She turned and licked his cheek, a final, grateful farewell. He watched as Tom gently clipped a new leash to her collar, and Sarah helped the kids coax the puppies into their car. He stood in the park and watched their taillights disappear down the highway, a lonely figure against the vast Montana sky, his heart both aching and completely full. Spring arrived in Silver Creek, melting the last of the snow and painting the hillsides a vibrant green. A few months had passed, and Liam's life looked different. He was now a permanent fixture at Dr. Reed's clinic, a part-time volunteer who worked with a quiet confidence and a gentle touch that all the animals seemed to trust. He was sweeping the floor one afternoon when his phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. It wasn't a text, but a video file. He leaned against the counter and pressed play. The screen filled with a scene of impossible beauty. A vast green pasture stretched out under a brilliant blue sky, and running through it was Grace. She was no longer just healthy. She was magnificent, a powerful, joyful creature in her element, her ears back and her tongue lolling in a happy grin. Chasing after her were 3 lanky adolescent dogs, her pups, nearly her size now, tumbling over each other in a game of chase with Chloe and Sam. The sound was a symphony of children's laughter and happy, joyous barking. Liam watched the video 3 times, a wide, peaceful smile spreading across his face. He had worried about Grace finding her happy ending, her paradise of green fields and loving hands. He looked around the small, familiar clinic, at the purring cat he had just finished treating, at Dr. Reed humming as she organized her files. He realized he had found his own version of that green pasture, right here in the town he had once been so desperate to escape. He was home. The story of Grace and Liam reminds us that sometimes the most profound rescues are the ones where we are not sure who is saving whom. A single soul reaching out from the brink can give another the purpose they were desperately searching for. It is a testament to the quiet strength found in loyalty, and the way one act of compassion can create a future no one thought was possible. This chapter of hope is now complete, but countless others are just beginning. To be there when the next story of survival unfolds, and to join a community that cherishes these miracles, we invite you to subscribe and follow our journey.